In this video, we're going to talk about putting triggers on the stack and what happens when you have more than one thing triggering at once. We'll talk about the basics first and then look at examples like creatures entering the battlefield, as well as triggers that happen at a specific point in the turn, like the end step. By the end, you'll have a solid understanding of how to stack your triggers for maximum value. So let's kick things off by talking about what triggered abilities are. Triggered abilities use three words: when, whenever, and at. Whenever the event happens, the game puts the triggered ability onto the stack the next time a player receives priority. If the trigger targets, you choose targets when it goes on the stack. If it says the word may, then you decide on resolution. Let's stay on this point for a moment. If a triggered ability says the word may, then you make the decision when the trigger resolves. For instance, Rhystic Study and Smothering Tithe don't tax you when you cast a spell or draw a card. They trigger when these events happen and their effects go onto the stack. And then you decide whether or not you'll pay when the triggers resolve. We also need to reiterate that targets for abilities that say the word target have to be decided when they're put onto the stack. Blood Artist and Lathiel, for instance, can't go onto the stack without targets chosen. You can't wait to see how other triggers resolve and then make your choice. This is why you can't gain life in response to Lathiel's trigger going onto the stack. It makes you choose targets for the counters you've earned as a result of gaining life during the turn. And a requirement of going onto the stack is that you've chosen your targets. So by the time you have priority to respond to the trigger on the stack, you'll already have decided the creatures you're putting your counters on and how many you're putting on each. Alright, so with those out of the way, let's talk about stacking triggers when you have more than one going onto the stack. If you have multiple things triggering at once, then you can order them however you'd like. You just have to let your table know how you're ordering them. Let's look at an example where the order doesn't really matter. Suppose you have a Soul Warden and a Soul's Attendant in play. The next time you have a creature enter the battlefield, each of their triggered abilities will go onto the stack, and you can put them on in any order you'd like. It doesn't matter either way here, but there are definitely common cases where ordering your triggers can make a big difference. For instance, I play a Myco Tyrant deck that cares about permanents going into the graveyard. The Myco Tyrant's trigger goes onto the stack at end step, and I also play a Palantir, which triggers at the same time. Now, the suboptimal way to play with these two cards would be to resolve the Myco Tyrant's trigger first. It checks how many permanents have been put into the graveyard on resolution. If I resolve the Palantir first, I get to mill more cards and add to the total number of cards that have gone into my graveyard. The distinction worth pointing out here between Lathiel and the Myco Tyrant is that I can mill more cards in response to the Myco Tyrant's trigger going onto the stack because it isn't targeting or locking anything in. It just cares about how many permanents have been put into the graveyard by the time it resolves. Lathiel, on the other hand, makes you choose targets before the trigger can go on the stack, so you're locked in with your choices and cannot gain more life in response to its trigger. Summing it all up, if you have more than one thing triggering at the same time, know that you can put them onto the stack in whatever order you'd like. Think about resolutions, targets, and if one order is better than the other. Or don't worry about it if it doesn't make a difference. In a video that will be out soon, we'll look at how attack triggers work and how knowing how to stack them can help you get a strategic edge. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.